bring healing. It brought the kind of raw, open-skin sorrow that makes you question how you ever laughed, how you ever lived, how you ever thought we'd all be okay again. And 3 days after the vigil in Costa Rica, where a child whispered, "He made me feel smart." Felicia Rashad, still sleepless, still wearing the same black dress, called for a private memorial, not one for news vans or press passes, but a ceremony for the people who knew Malcolm not as Theo, but as a brother, a son, a protector. And the chapel where they gathered was dim, no flowers, no choir, just silence and shadows. And there, seated in the front pew clutching a letter he'd written her in 2014, Felicia looked smaller than she ever had, her hands trembling as she rose to speak, her voice barely rising above a whisper as she read the first lines. "Mom, if this life ever gets too heavy for me, I want you to know you were my anchor. Even when I couldn't breathe, your words reminded me I was still alive." And halfway through the sentence, her voice cracked, her body leaned forward like she was about to collapse again, and she asked the question no mother wants to ask. "Why didn't I see it? Why didn't I stop him?" And from the back of the room came a trembling voice, a sound like someone exhaling their own guilt, whispering, "Because he was too good at hiding it, just like he was good at acting." And that line, that single shattering sentence, broke the entire room wide open, because everyone realized this wasn't just a eulogy, it was a reckoning, an autopsy of silence, and the weight of it all fell like a casket on the chests of every person who had once shared a scene with him, laughed with him, received one of his famous late-night pep talks, or just sat beside him thinking the smile on his face meant he was okay. And then came the moment no one was prepared for, Malcolm's final voicemail, played for the first time in full, his voice vulnerable, exposed, almost childlike, saying, "To everyone who ever believed in Theo, thank you. But the truth is, I never knew how to be okay. Not truly, not fully. I hope one..." It began with a whisper, a headline, a tremble across timelines like the earth itself gasped. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, forever our Theo from The Cosby Show, was gone, and the silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was seismic, generational, suffocating. And there she stayed, staring at reruns, whispering back to a ghost, "I love you no matter what," knowing she was speaking to a memory that would never again speak back. Until another voicemail, unreleased, unrehearsed, and unfiltered, was recovered and played in that room, and the room went cold with heartbreak. "You kept me going when I didn't even want to go on." And that was it. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, pregnant with pain too large to carry. And even the most hardened producers had to step outside, their faces in their hands, as everyone present realized that this wasn't just the loss of an actor. It was the quiet erasure of childhood safety, of Saturday mornings, of warm living rooms where laughter wrapped around us like a blanket. And soon, fans began appearing outside Felicia's home. Strangers who felt like family, grown men holding candles, mothers clutching Cosby Show DVDs to their chests, a woman sobbing into her son's shirt whispering, "I named you after him." And by nightfall, Felicia stepped outside in black, swollen-eyed and shaking, to face a world shattered by loss. And when asked for a statement, she didn't give a press quote, she didn't deliver a sound bite, she just whispered 3 words that broke the internet. It had been 73 days since Malcolm-Jamal Warner's passing, 73 long, aching days since Felicia Rashad collapsed to the floor screaming, "Not my Theo." 73 days since the world lost not just a man, but a mirror, a reflection of its own neglected pain. And yet, the grief hadn't faded, it hadn't softened. It had only morphed into something more collective, more potent, more desperate, because somewhere along the line, this wasn't just about a beloved actor dying, it became about everyone who'd ever suffered in silence behind a smile, everyone who ever played the strong one while dying inside. And that's when the whispers began, the movement, the reckoning, the storm. Malcolm unknowingly started by dying too quietly, and it started first on college campuses, where black student unions began hosting Theo Talks, candlelit forums where students admitted, often for the first time, that they were drowning behind their curated confidence, that they grew up with Theo as their big brother, their measuring stick, their emotional compass, and now that he was gone, it was like someone had ripped the roof off their childhood shelter and left them exposed to a storm they didn't know how to name. And then came the teachers, the therapists, the veterans, the pastors who admitted in viral TikToks and trembling podcast episodes that they had cried more for Malcolm than they had for their own family, because what he represented wasn't just comfort. It was the illusion that someone strong, someone funny, someone beloved could never be broken. And when that illusion shattered, we all saw ourselves in the pieces, and through that mirror of mourning came something extraordinary. Project 88, the non-profit he secretly built, took off like wildfire, receiving over $2 million in donations within the first 2 months. But it wasn't just the money. It was the stories that poured in with every cent, like the young actor who wrote, "I was planning my suicide the night I watched Theo's final clip, and now I'm still here," or the single mother who said, "I named my son Theo because he gave me hope." And as these stories spread, so did the urgency, the undeniable need to hear, to see, to hold space for the ones who made us laugh while they were quietly fading. And all the while, Felicia Rashad remained mostly silent, her voice still healing. Her days spent sorting through storage boxes filled with letters from fans, old cast photos, Polaroids of Malcolm napping between takes, each one another pinprick to a heart already torn wide open. But then came the email that would change everything. An invitation from the Academy of Television Arts Sciences, requesting her presence at the 77th Emmy Awards, where Malcolm would be honored not just with an in memoriam mention, but with the first ever Legacy Luminary Tribute, a new category created in response to what his loss revealed about the entertainment industry's failure to see beyond the spotlight. And for weeks Felicia hesitated, haunted by nightmares of seeing his face on the big screen without being able to run to him, touch him, fix him. But on the night of the awards, she appeared like a vision pulled from the rubble of grief, wearing the same gold chain Malcolm gave her in 1988, a floor-length black gown embroidered with MJW in silver thread over her heart. And as she stepped onto the stage to deliver the tribute, the crowd of Hollywood elites, many of whom had worked with him, admired him, or simply grown up watching him, rose in silence. Not a clap, not a cough, just reverence. And when she finally spoke, the words didn't sound rehearsed, they sounded like scripture. "The world knew Malcolm as Theo. I knew him as my child," she began, her voice steady but soft. "And when a light like that goes out, the world doesn't just dim, it shifts." And then she paused, held up a worn piece of paper, and read his final message. "Sometimes the ones who smile the most are the ones screaming the loudest." And the room, the very room that once cheered for Emmy, wins and ratings records, sat in stunned, tear-soaked silence as the reality settled in. They missed it. They all missed it. And now it was too late. And when the screen behind her lit up with clips of Theo hugging Claire, laughing with Denise, comforting Rudy, each frame now a ghost, people began to cry openly, from Oprah in the front row to up-and-coming Gen Z stars who hadn't even been born when the show first aired. Because this wasn't just a montage. It was a funeral for an era, a final goodbye to the comfort of believing that the ones who made us laugh were immune to sorrow. And as the montage ended, a final never-before-seen clip played, Malcolm and Felicia sitting together on a porch just weeks before his death, and he turns to her, serious for a moment, and says, "You know, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to promise me something." And she asks, "What?" Exactly 1 year to the day since Malcolm-Jamal Warner's death, the world stood still once more, not in shock this time, but in reverence, in raw, reverberating remembrance, as cities across the globe held synchronized candlelight vigils at 8:08 p.m. sharp, a reference to the iconic Cosby Show Season 8, Episode 8 scene where Theo gives that tear-choked monologue about proving he can succeed with dyslexia, a scene now studied in psychology classes for its emotional authenticity and replayed so often on social media that the phrase, "You just gotta let me try, Dad," had become a healing mantra for a generation. And on this solemn anniversary, across the country, church bells tolled 44 times, one for each year Malcolm lived in quiet war with himself, and somewhere in the middle of that communal ache, Felicia Rashad emerged again. Not just older now, but transformed, her grief no longer a wound but a weapon, forged into something sharp and seismic, because for the past 6 months, she had been building something behind the scenes, something even Project 88 didn't see coming. A multi-million-dollar sanctuary and performing arts academy for at-risk black youth, built in the very Bronx neighborhood Malcolm once visited on a forgotten 2009 speaking tour, where he told a classroom of 5th graders, "You matter. You're already a legacy." And now, 16 years later, that promise was made manifest in the opening of the MJW Legacy House, a 5-story beacon of color and sound and sacred pause, where every hallway was lined with photos of Malcolm in mid-laughter, and every room was named after a Cosby character, the Rudy Writing Lab, the Denise Creative Studio, the Claire Healing Wing. And at the grand opening, Felicia didn't give a speech. She sang, trembling and radiant, her voice cracking through bridge over troubled water as families held hands, staff members wept, and one former foster kid whispered, "She's singing to her son." And when she finished, the entire crowd erupted not in applause, but in silence, sacred, breathless silence. And as Felicia looked out over the sea of upturned faces, she simply mouthed, "He lives here," and then stepped down without another word, because by now she understood. The louder the world screamed for justice, the softer grief had to speak, and yet the world kept demanding more, because just when the pain seemed to settle into meaning, an unexpected shock detonated beneath everything. An anonymous tip leaked to Variety claiming that Malcolm's death may not have been entirely self-inflicted, that in fact there were sealed therapy notes, NDAs, and a quietly silenced malpractice suit involving a disgraced celebrity therapist who allegedly prescribed Malcolm a toxic cocktail of medications he was never mentally stable enough to mix, and within hours, nurtured justice for Malcolm began trending again, not with tribute videos this time, but with outrage, anger, betrayal, people asking, "Why didn't we know? And did they let him die because it was easier than saving him? And was Hollywood complicit in preserving its golden boy image while its stars bled out behind closed doors?" And suddenly the legacy had teeth, and Felicia, blindsided, was thrust back into a war she thought she'd already won, forced to confront not just the loss, but the possibility that her child's death wasn't just tragic, it was preventable. And that opened a vein so deep it spilled into every interview, every think piece, every protest outside talent agencies that had signed known predators but ignored black mental health cries for decades. And as pressure mounted, Netflix pulled 4 mental health documentaries from its rotation, replacing them with a new 8-part series co-produced by Project 88 and Oprah's Harpo Studios titled He Was Smiling, The Truth Behind the Mask, featuring testimonials from Malcolm's co-stars, childhood friends, and even a chilling, unsealed deposition from his final psychiatrist who admitted under oath, "I didn't take his anxiety seriously because he was always smiling in the lobby." And that line alone became a battle cry, spray-painted on college dorm walls, tattooed on arms, screamed at the gates of the Emmys. And meanwhile, Felicia, stoic no more, turned into something else entirely, an avenger. A mother unleashed, launching congressional testimony before a Senate Committee on Celebrity Wellness Oversight, sobbing as she slammed her palm on the desk and shouted, "They called him a brand before they called him a man." And that moment, that guttural cry, made headlines for weeks, prompting the White House to name July 20th, the day Malcolm died, as National Actor Wellness Day, a federal observance with bipartisan support. And by now, the world had split into 2 groups. Those who wanted to bury the scandal and those who refused to let him die in vain. And at the center of it all stood Felicia, cloaked in black, her voice now a blade, her eyes full of unspeakable truth. But just when the dust seemed to settle again,